Hey, I'm Molly Sims.
And I'm Emese Gormley. We're two girls obsessed with one thing, beauty.
And by that, we mean everything that makes you look
And feel
beautiful.
We're calling on our favorite health experts, industry insiders, and friends to answer all your beauty questions.
With a drink in hand.
Definitely with a drink in hand.
You're listening to Lipstick on the Rim with Molly Sims. It's the beginning of the year. It was the end of the year last year. Anxiety, feeling completely out of control. Somewhat normal.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say sometimes it's just a moment and other times it's a full-blown spiral.
Absolutely. It's a moment and then it becomes a spiral, which is exactly why we're very excited to have today's guest, because she quite literally is the anxiety toolkit. We're joined by the incredible Kimberly Quinlan, a licensed marriage and family therapist. We're so excited. We can't even tell you. The host of your Anxiety Toolkit podcast. She's been recognized by the New York Times as one of the top 6 podcasts to calm your anxiety. She's the founder of cbtschool.com, which we're going to talk all about. It's an amazing online platform that provides step-by-step resources for anxiety, OCD, depression, and everything in between. Today, she's here to debunk a few myths surrounding helping us understand anxiety. She's going to share her practical tools for navigating in our daily lives. Kimberly Quinlan, we're so excited because anxiety,
It's thrown around a lot, that word.
it's thrown around a lot. And, you know, I'm in my 50s, she's in her late 40s, and we feel like it's only gotten worse. I mean, we know
Having kids doesn't help.
having kids does not help. Today, we're going to be talking about navigating anxiety in adulthood, debunking myths about anxiety, and the tools and strategy to overcome anxiety. Arguably, the biggest myth about anxiety is that it isn't real and it's all in your head. Let's try to debunk that.
Thank you for
Shall
having
we?
me.
Oh, we're so excited. I mean,
We're very excited.
we're very anxious people. We weren't always anxious. I mean, maybe we were.
I
We just
saw
didn't
something
know.
in a story yesterday that said, hold on, let me overthink this. And I was like, should I buy this?
Yeah.
Because that's really on brand for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been, and it can become overwhelming.
Yeah. No, it does. I think it does. I think we both, especially if you've suffered any form of trauma in any aspect of your life, I think it feeds into anxiety and it can be a beast that really takes over.
So let's start. What is anxiety?
Sure. So anxiety is an experience that we have. It's not all in your head. It can be very, very real. While it may be not true as you experience, but it can feel very, very real. It's an experience of an emotion similar to all the other emotions. What I will first say is anxiety in and of itself isn't bad. That's like the first thing I would say. It's in and of itself, it's not bad. In fact, it's good because it's really our brain's way of protecting us from danger and imminent threat. However, sometimes our brain sets off the fire alarm way too much and way too often, making us believe that we are in threat and danger all the time. And then we, of course, go into, hypervigilance about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a spiral. That's like the word I use.
It can be. Yeah.
And what is the difference between clinical anxiety and stress or just overall nervousness?
Sure. So life comes with stressors. We could even say, as we all come to work, that is a stressor, meaning it's a demand that's put on us. Some people may experience that as a positive thing. We call that eustress. And some people experience it as negative, distress. Often what happens is the way we perceive that stress, the way we experience it, the stories we tell ourselves can then create anxiety. And again, anxiety is just our brain's way. It sends out a whole bunch of hormones, preparing us to flee, run away, freeze, to try and protect ourselves from danger. But daily stresses in and of themselves, again, is not a problem. It's how we interpret it.
So when you're working with couples, kids, women, how do you differentiate between the two, whether it's complete anxiety or it's just stress or it's just you're nervous?
Yeah. So again, The difference is in the experience. So stress, again, is something that we all experience, as is anxiety. However, anxiety, you'll know it in your body. It's an increase in heart rate. It's racing thoughts. It might be that you need to go to the bathroom right away. It might feel like you're being electrocuted, some people might say, or they're feeling this whoosh of panic. That's really what we talk about when we're talking about anxiety. Stress is really just the demands that are placed on us throughout the day.
Would you say that anxiety is sort of something we overthink? Because for me, I use the word I'm anxious or I have anxiety about certain things, but sometimes I think I just overthink a situation and then I go down a rabbit hole. Like, would you say those are sort of the same thing? Or is that sort of normal behavior? Like, I mean, I think most of us, whether we have kids or a job that's stressful, to your point, there are things every single day that can trigger some level of stress. And now we're calling it anxiety. How would you say for someone like me who, I haven't been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder per se, but like I do feel I have that. How would you say you can differentiate the two?
So when someone experiences anxiety, let's say you're crossing the street and a bus is coming for you. That is an actual imminent danger. We will release anxiety throughout our body through any of those symptoms I experienced. And then once that bus drives past or we remove ourselves from the bus, that anxiety will usually go away. Mm-hmm. However, if you're someone who is prone to having higher levels of anxiety, when we have anxiety, it's so uncomfortable and it feels like we need to solve it. And that's why we go into worrying behavior or ruminative behavior. So the rumination is our attempt to squash that anxiety and make it go away, maybe solve it, get rid of it. But what happens there is once we start worrying, usually worrying is only really effective for a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And then once you can't decide and you can't solve it, then it just becomes something that you do on the cycle.
That's what I do.
And then it reinforces the fear as if the fear is dangerous and real. And then our brain continues to send out anxiety hormones. And now you're stuck in a loop of anxiety, maybe ineffective ways of coping, more anxiety, more ineffective ways. And then it sort of grows and grows and spreads over your life.
So for me, I'll give you an example. And I actually said this to you the other day.
She wants me to go on medicine. I'm just
No, this is me for my own thing. Every time I'm driving on a 1-lane road, every single time without fail, every time a car is driving towards me, I have an anxiety that kicks in that car is going to hit me. Okay. And it happens without fail every single time I'm driving. And I envision like getting hit. I envision getting into a car wreck. And as soon as that car passes, I move on. But it happens.
It's almost like catastrophic thinking.
Yeah.
We both
suffer from it.
We both suffer from it. But I've suffered from it probably, I don't know, since before I had kids.
Yeah.
With
It's
the plane
more so
going
with kids,
down but it's increased as our families have grown. You have more writing on stuff. You lost parents. Is that normal behavior? I guess is my question, because I truly do think sometimes, am I nuts or my kid is playing on the playground? I can't watch my children on a playground. I envision one kid falling backwards and breaking their neck.
Right. So,
do I sound crazy?
She's going to think we're crazy.
Not at all. Not at all. This is why we talk about debunking it. This is just your brain doing what your brain does best. There is a part of your brain in the very center that detects danger. It's its job. It's probably the oldest part of your brain that developed many millions of years ago to help you flee from very scary things.
Yeah.
However, again, so let's say you look at your kids and they're playing and you have your brain's doing its job, sending imagery of, blood or hospital sirens and all the things. So when your brain does that, and if you treat that like that is real and is important and is an imminent threat, it will keep feeding your brain to keep treating every single thought it has as if it's dangerous.
So how do I solve it to stop it? Because it's not normal.
We need your toolbox
I'm always
kit.
telling my kids, be careful on the playground. And I know it's like every parenting expert will be like, stop telling your kids to be careful.
Yeah. So a huge piece of the work that I do with patients and in sort of more of the public work that I do is teaching people to be able to tolerate the feeling of anxiety without responding to it as if it's a fact.
Okay, give us an
tolerate,
example.
Okay. You're driving down the street on a one-way road, I think you said.
Yep.
And you have imagery or a thought that something terrible will happen, something catastrophic. That's one of the ways, an error in thinking that we have when we have anxiety. Your job might be just to say, thanks, brain, for that. And, you're just doing your job. And catch any little nuanced, subtle ways in which you're responding as if it is a real danger. Now, we wouldn't do this if you were, in fact, in real danger, right? If you were in a very dangerous situation, this would not apply. But in this situation, you're in a very nice, safe car. You're on a road where maybe there are lines on the street. Everything is saying this is just your brain doing its job. Your job would be, okay, am I holding my shoulders tight? Am I gritting my teeth? Am I clenching the steering wheel? Am I engaging with the thoughts as if, oh my gosh, yes, it is true. Maybe you're being very hypervigilant and you sit up straighter and you start to hold the steering wheel harder.
Every single one of what you just talked about, I experience when I go over like this, like bridges, like the Coronado in San Diego, and I'm like, oh my God.
So you're going to
physically, I feel it.
Of course. And we want to slow down and acknowledge that this is not easy. This is hard. This is not fun stuff. It's not fun to have your body dump all these anxiety hormones in your body. How might you want to show up in this situation where you're not responding to it as if it is a real danger, right? I always sort of say play surfer dude. Like surfer dude sitting back like this. Maybe one hand on the steering wheel, right?
Yeah.
Like again, the contrast of you holding the steering wheel and maybe telling everyone to be quiet because you have to concentrate or what.
No, I do. I'll yell at my kids, stop talking.
Yeah. So this is very normal.
Yeah.
These are normal anxious reactions or responses. But really, what you're doing is you're basically training your brain to stay fearful. So we want to retrain your brain. We want to show it that we're going to treat this fear differently from now on.
And what are ways we can do that?
Well, a very simple way is
because I can ruminate. I can ruminate in such a bad way where I can't get out of the spiral.
Yeah. So simply put, now I want to really preface that everything that I say right here is easier said than done.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do need mental health professionals to help you with these tools. So I don't want to make this sound like it's just a piece of cake because it's not.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you want to do the opposite of what anxiety is having you do. So if anxiety wants you to clench the steering wheel, the opposite would be to have soft hands. Not to take your hands off the wheel. We don't need that, but softer hands. If anxiety is having you be hypervigilant, could you be a little more mindful, right? Maybe you can even play with anxiety. Like I like to mess with anxiety a little bit, like because when we mess with it, that's sort of when we win.
Yeah.
So I might be like, okay, anxiety, you want me to have everything quiet? I'm actually going to sing happy birthday as I cross this bridge, or I'm going to, whatever your favorite Christmas song.
So basically you're saying you don't let it control you.
No,
so you do the
absolutely.
opposite.
You do the opposite. You do the opposite. Now, when it comes to rumination, so what we're talking about are very physical behaviors, tensing, clenching, hypervigilant. Mental rumination is the same practices. It's a little different in that it's in your head. No one knows you're doing it. You could be ruminating about your kids at school as we speak, and I would have no clue. And in that case, we practice a lot of what we call mindfulness, which is bringing your attention to the present moment, which is the here and the now. Not the maybe, not what could happen, but what is actually happening. Now, this is where you can even share. Our brains are so creative at trying to get us back into fear. So let's say you are afraid of, give me another example.
My child getting sick again. Like I had a daughter who had lymphoma.
Okay.
So for me, it's every time one of my kids now says, I have an ache or have a pain, my brain immediately goes to the darkest place. And then I try to rationalize it by going, lightning doesn't strike twice. The odds of another child of mine having cancer is slim to none,
Mm-hmm.
but I try to go there, but my instinct is always
Oh my God.
the worst.
The worst.
Right. And again, this is where we would validate. Like, you might even put your hand on your heart and say, of course, that's what your brain is saying. Of
Yeah.
course, that's what your brain. Fear only attacks the things we love the most.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't care about, you're not having anxiety about things you don't care about, or things
Yeah.
you don't love. Where often it really attacks the things we value. So you would first validate that, right? Of course, it's going to attack that.
Yeah.
And as you are doing, right, sounds like you're doing some reframing, like it doesn't strike twice, or,
Mhm.
bring your attention to what is actually happening here and right now. What do I see? What do I hear? Allowing yourself to have this present moment. And then the other piece is, are you willing to be uncertain?
No.
No. We're terrible at that.
Well, your relationship with uncertainty can determine how much anxiety strips you from your life.
What does that mean?
I'm a big advocate for getting good at being uncertain. Because when we're not certain, what you resist persists. When you're not uncertain, when you refuse to let uncertainty be a part of your day, anxiety will take over. Anxiety will run the show. Because if you need certainty, you will ruminate. You will be hypervigilant. You will think the worst because you're constantly trying to get ahead of the maybe thing that will happen. That's often what people with anxiety do. I'm one of those. I'm not judging at all.
Yeah.
I'm one of you as well. Really, we could spend our whole life running from fear.
I guess that phrase that just popped into my head is the only thing that's certain is death and taxes. Right?
That's it.
That's, I guess, to your point, everything else is uncertain.
And this is where we get to be so gentle and tender with ourselves around that. Like, being uncertain sucks. It's not fun. It's especially if you have anxiety. But how can we build some safety around it?
How do you become okay with it being uncertain, though?
It's not that we're saying it's okay. It's not that we're saying you have to feel good about it. You just have to be willing to tolerate the rise and fall of it, because it will rise and fall.
That is life.
That is life.
It will rise and fall. That's the thing about, again, I always pretend anxiety is this little monster on my shoulder sometimes. And he's got just so sassy. He's always got something to say. And if we were to practice being uncertain, he might even say, like, well, this is not going to go away until you solve it, right? Or this, you're irresponsible if you don't check your child's temperature a gazillion times. And this is where you can practice just being with the experience of uncertainty, knowing that it usually solves itself. The fears usually, like, as you drive across that bridge, it will solve itself. The tension, the rumination, you're actually not changing anything.
I think that's a really hard thing to do
It's
when
so hard.
we both are somewhat control freaks, just somewhat. Like, we like to
Be in control.
Yeah, me
and
too.
uncertainty is the very opposite of that. There's a lack of control and uncertainty.
Well, here's the thing, and I will say, in no way would I have anyone listen to this or any podcast of mine where I'm telling people what they should do. It's a choice. There have been seasons in my life where I have chosen to want control. There have been seasons where I've had to stop and reflect and say, this isn't working anymore. This is causing me more suffering, or this is impacting my child or my husband or my career. So I think it's a very personal and individual conversation with what we have. You might say after today, you know what? For the 30 seconds it takes me to clench the steering wheel, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with the consequences of feeling that anxiety. I'm okay with that discomfort that causes. I'd prefer to do it that way than to retrain my brain in that one circumstance. That's okay. But what we want to do is the work of self-compassion, which is what I talk a lot about, is really taking care of the short-term and the long-term me.
Yeah.
And when we have those conversations, we can say the real care of taking care of the long-term me is to not keep feeding that fear.
Because if you keep feeding the fear, it will only grow.
It will.
It will become this, and it will become that. It will become something else. It will become the monster on your shoulder that just in your little ear.
Yeah. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. One of the main modalities we use is called exposure and response prevention. I'm not giving you any kind of therapy advice, but if you were my client, I would say every day for the next 2 weeks, I want you to drive over that bridge, or I want you to drive on that road, and I want you to practice doing that opposite action, or just validating the fear but not getting in the mess of it. And often what we find is you will habituate pretty quickly to that by simply just changing your behavior and saying to your brain, I'm actually going to willingly do this. Not only am I not going to respond, I'm going to do it every day.
And you do this with OCD patients.
All the time. That's
right?
the treatment we use.
That's the treatment
the
you use.
more, with phobias, health anxiety, social anxiety, the higher the fear, the more intense the fear, the more we expose them to it. Of course, with their permission and with their agreements, but that's the work we do. It's a beautiful model because it flips the narrative on fear. Fear has us wanting to run away. Run.
Like my fear of pigeons?
Yes.
It is actually.
She does have a legit fear of pigeons.
It is. So for you, what you would tell me is to go to Venice and stand in the square and have those dirty rats land on me.
Stop.
And you would tolerate whatever emotion or discomfort.
Die.
You wouldn't die. You would be uncomfortable.
So you mentioned something that I think is important, and I think it's something I have a fear that I am doing. So when I am anxious, you mentioned our children. And I worry sometimes that my anxiety rubs off on my kids, and then I am creating that worrisome behavior in children. How do you tell your patients, clients, or just me right now, to monitor that and check it, and also how to deal with any anxiety that your children kind of can suffer from?
Yeah. Number one, we're going to be gentle here because mothering is already hard enough.
Yeah.
I'm not here to be telling anyone that they're doing it wrong. It's already hard enough. However, you are right in that our kids are watching all the time. They're watching, and they're looking to us to determine, again, our brain is constantly detecting danger. Often our kids are looking to us to see whether they need to detect danger. It's kind of like that saying when you're on the airplane, if you're in turbulence, you look at the hostess, and if they're, or the flight attendant.
I did this the other day. I'm like,
if they're,
is she reacting to the drop in 70 feet of altitude? Like, is she? And she was not.
And if she's not, we're watching, right? And they're watching us too. So there is some facts and truth to the fact that they do learn anxiety from us. Now, that's not always the case. You might have an anxious kid who just genetically they're set up to have anxiety. So we don't want to blame moms. We're not interested in that. Again, what we want to think about is you're suffering with an anxiety. Let's say you're around pigeons.
They laugh at me.
You're suffering. We want to move towards actions where you don't have to suffer as much, which is not treating it like it is dangerous or disgusting. It could be a disgust thing as much as it is a fear thing. Which
their
can
wings,
sometimes,
their flapping wings.
Yeah, it could be a double whammy there. So we want to reduce your suffering by changing your behavior, but we also want to reduce your children's suffering by them witnessing you in distress and you perceiving it as a danger as well. So a really good example is when my children were very young. I have 2 children. Both kids, strangely, had a massive dog phobia. Massive. We didn't have dogs at the time. And so what did we do? I didn't make them avoid dogs. I didn't ask the neighbor not to walk their dogs when my kids are around. I was like, let's go to the dog park. But I'm not going to throw you in with the wolves, technically. We're just going to park and we're just going to watch them first. And maybe they'll witness me going, doggy, look at that doggy. Oh, cute dog. And then next time I might have them go to the dog park, but not go in. Maybe just watch out of the car.
Exposing
and we gradually do that. And we're learning that just because our brain tells us it's scary doesn't mean that's a fact.
Listen, I saw what Emese has gone through with her family, and like the sheer mental positivity was amazing.
But that was getting through a bad situation. And for me now, it's like, and I worry because I do think my kids now tell me every single ache they have
Mm-hmm.
because they know inherently what
Yeah.
we went through. And I think for me, I don't want them to worry about every single pain they have, right? So when my daughter's like, Mom, my hip hurts, or my knee hurts, or my head hurts, like I'm like checking for a lump on the head. I mean,
We
it
had a
is.
situation like a month ago because Lily had the same exact swelling pain of where it all started.
I
But
mean,
it wasn't real. I said to her,
wasn't-
I'm like, this is not real. This is just in your head. And it was her teeth, her molars.
It was really her molars this time. And it was like the exact same, like it was such PTSD for me all over again. So, I took her to the dentist and the dentist was like, this is her molars. Like this is exactly that. But that was what they had said to me the first time with my daughter.
Yeah.
And it ended up being, a type of cancer. But
just dealing with PTSD is
really hard.
Yeah. There are really, some gold standard treatments for PTSD as well. Not that dissimilar to what we're talking about. There are two types of treatment you can use for PTSD, one being prolonged exposure, where you go back and work through the index event, the thing that happened. And then there's another treatment called cognitive processing therapy, which is where you identify some stuck points you have around that event and see how you're perceiving today's world through those biases and through those beliefs. Again, when you have suffered through that, again, it's so interesting how most people who are anxious can handle crises just like a star.
But we can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We
go
can,
into, like,
we go
fight
into
mode.
freaking war.
Well, that's the cool thing about anxious people. Like, I'm such a anxious person fan. Like, they can double in the moment. They're the people I want to be with.
Yeah.
Right. However, it's usually after the event where it all hits us and we start to try and construct a narrative to make sense of the world. And it does tend to be a little catastrophic, the bias. And for a real reason.
Yeah.
You're going to naturally, like I always think about, like, what's my brain trying to tell me here? My brain's trying to say, is there any way we could avoid that ever happening again? But then we also have to have this wisdom of going, if I respond to that, well, that's helpful. If I respond to that, am I just starting to feel a condition or a disorder that's going to keep me in fight and flight? And we don't want that.
No.
Mm-mm.
What are your thoughts on anxiety medications?
I am on anxiety medication. I love them.
It's a tool, right? It's a tool.
I'll tell you why. I am
How
very...
did you get into anxiety? Like, how did you become, the doctor of anxiety?
So I used to be, quick story. I had myself a decent sized eating disorder when I moved to America. I'm Australian, in case you didn't
I could pick up on the accent. I got that.
I had a decent sized eating disorder, which I had so beautifully disguised from as many people as I could. And of course, as every good eating disordered person has, I worked as a personal trainer. That was my job. And I loved it and I was good at it until once I realized that I was really struggling and I needed to get better, that I couldn't do that job anymore. I wasn't going to recover in that environment. Some people can, I just couldn't. So most of my job as a personal trainer was being a therapist anyway. And so I went on to go through and do my master's degree to become a therapist. And it was always anxiety. It was always going to be anxiety. I always sort of, as much as I had a diagnosed eating disorder, anxiety fueled the whole thing. And it was a mess and it was horrible and it was painful, but I was stuck. And so I started treating severe anxiety disorders, very, very difficult conditions, OCD, phobias, health anxiety, and I love it. It's so great because, you're talking about debunking myths. So many people come to me after having had therapy for decades and getting nowhere. only to find that they were being told to keep avoiding anxiety, try to make it go away. But the beauty here is let's actually not vilify anxiety. Let's actually just get better at
Embrace it a little bit.
embracing it
Yeah.
and being kind to yourself as you watch it rise and fall. So that's my story.
Okay, you have the cbtschool.com. It's a step-by-step. It provides resources for people with anxiety, OCD, depression. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I have a private practice. About 8 years ago, I was getting calls from people all over the country. I have a podcast. They would hear from me through my podcast, Your Anxiety Toolkit. Like, how can we work with you? No one in my state treats these conditions. I'm in this terrible treatment and I can't seem to get better. And I was just turning them away. I couldn't help them.
Yeah.
So I created CBT School, which is basically me training people who don't have access to, the gold standard treatments and showing them exactly what I do with my patients so that they can do it on their own. So it's not a replacement for therapy if you have access, but if you don't have access, it might be a little step up to get you on the right track.
Let's talk about where the kids are today.
Mm-hmm.
Severe anxiety, social media, FOMO.
It is hard for the kids. They do have, I would have crumbled if I was a kid at this age, I think, with my level of anxiety. They are under an immense amount of pressure. Social media has put pressure on them. However, I will also say I have seen clinically some wonderful parts of the youth these days in that mental health is cool now. To have a mental health condition, we can talk about it.
I can
tell you that I'm depressed. I can tell you I have ADHD. I can tell you I have OCD and I've got intrusive thoughts. And I can say, hey, guys, I'm having a panic attack right now.
I think that is so powerful and so true of how far we have come that we're actually talking about it.
Yeah. Medication. Kids will talk about the meds that they're on. So I mean, I'm trying to be positive. Definitely kids are under an immense amount of stress. And we talked about stress before, but like pressure to get into college. Like it was nothing like I experienced. The pressure to do well in school and do well in sports.
And I think that it creates a stress factor on these kids
Oh my gosh.
then I think snowballs into an anxiety. And I do worry about the mental health of kids because, I worry about it with my own child, like I want her to excel. I want her to do well, but I don't want her to feel so much pressure that she starts to feel anxious. And I think that is, what do you say to parents in these situations?
It has to be individual because there are some kids, I have a teenager myself. Some kids thrive on that pressure. And then it's really hard for the kids who are more anxious to watch that and say, well, am I supposed to want that? What's wrong with me if I don't?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very individual having those conversations with your children. It's a wax and a wane, and it depends on your child. I haven't figured this out. I'm a marriage and family therapist. How I parent one child is completely different to how I parent my younger son. So you just got to.
And I think that is really smart. I think you cannot parent every child the same.
You can't discipline them the same. Everything is different.
I made the mistake early of parenting my eldest daughter how I was parented. And my husband had to step in and be like, this is not going to work for her.
Yeah.
We're going to have to, I had to rethink like, what's this going to look like?
Yeah.
It's about
What
being
was the
okay.
reaction you were getting from your daughter?
I was raised very, very disciplined. And she felt very controlled. I think she felt that it was, again, this is anxiety, how we interpret things. So what one child might see as just good rules, and now I know the structure and the rules of the family, she found it to be overpowering. She felt judged. She couldn't express herself the way she wanted to. It felt scary. So we had to do a pivot.
Was that hard?
I think there was a bit of a stubborn piece in me of being like, but no, we live in a scary world, so I want them to be. And then, of course, most of parenting is attunement. So it's me stopping and going, okay, let's get curious about what she needs. Let's actually ask her what
Yeah.
she needs. And learning, sort of being uncertain, learning to trust and be uncertain about the fact that I still don't know what is perfect for her and right for her.
Yeah.
That's parenting.
That is
There is-
parenting.
you guys, as much as you had that reaction to me saying be uncertain, you're already being uncertain.
Yeah.
It's already there in your life.
Just never heard someone put it that way.
I know.
Be uncertain. That is a very hard pill to swallow.
It is the best gift you will ever give yourself.
I love what you said. I think the key, and you and I both need to be better at this, is to actually just stay in the moment. Right
Stay
now,
in the
everything is okay.
Yep.
Everything's okay. Tomorrow is not promised, right? I mean, it's just that's what we know all these cliches,
Mm-hmm.
but to try to actually absorb them and live them is a very different thing.
Yeah. I think another way of framing it is just staying steady in what's effective and kind towards yourself
Mhm.
is being present and uncertain and uncomfortable. But a lot of this is how we respond to our own discomfort. Just being steady as that discomfort stays in our body.
being steady.
It's a practice.
It's a muscle.
Yeah.
It's a muscle that we can strengthen. We have,
And what are some small little ways we can start to strengthen that?
again, checking how you are responding to anxiety. I would just say get a notebook, write down, like, when that fear shows up, how do I respond? Whether it be, again, tensing the steering wheel, asking for reassurance is another big one. It might be avoiding the fear. It might be ruminating about it. It might be beating yourself up. Really do an inventory of how you're responding,
Mhm.
and then just stop for a second and ask, is this preventing it from happening? Is it helpful? Do I want to keep doing it? That inventory is so important. The next piece is, again, mindfulness. How can I be present? What do you see? What do you smell? What do you hear? While your body is panicking, you can be present by just observing what's happening, knowing that, again, just because it feels real doesn't mean it's true.
I know.
Does it help to have a partner? Like her and I talk on the phone every day. So if there's a moment where either having a moment of panic,
Could we be each
friendships-
other's therapist
Yeah,
is what she's asking.
Okay, so
Thank you for saying
this-
that so clearly. Yes.
Having someone who can acknowledge and sit with you while you tolerate your own discomfort is the most beautiful thing you could have, especially as a mom and as a
Yeah.
woman. However, here it comes. If you're going to that person in the hope of that they will take your anxiety away, it's just feeding that fear. You're just growing that fear and treating it like it's important. So there was a book that came out several years ago called Chatter, and it was based around the anxiety. It was based around the research that often we verbalize our fears, and that verbalization is no different to us just ruminating. It's just feeding it.
We're looking for.
Well, then we're ruminating a lot together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's finding a balance with your best friend or your partner and even your therapist of finding a balance of being constructive in what do I need,
Mhm.
what's effective, what's not, how can I support you is a really great question to ask, because what that does is it says, we're not here to take it away. There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
just because you're uncomfortable. I'm here to support you as you tolerate your discomfort
Yeah.
and not engage in it as if it's actually happening. So there's a balance of those two things when
Yeah.
it comes to being in relationship with someone with
All
anxiety.
right.
Could you
These
live
are
with
exercises-
us?
Yeah. Okay.
wanna
Can
come?
we add you to our
Can you
favorites on our phone so we can call you?
add-
Thanks.
Yeah, speed dial me.
Favorites on
And
Netflix,
you know,
favorites on our phone.
Actually, let me tell you, you know what a lot of times we do is, let's say if you said, oh my gosh, I saw a bump on my arm. What do you think it is? I would very lovingly send you the shrug emoji, because I would say, just be uncertain. Just allow it.
But be uncertain.
Be uncertain.
We do a little rapid fire here on Lipstick
That's
on
a
the Rookie.
certainty.
What is your
That is a
guilt-
certainty we have.
Now I'm anxious.
What I would ask you, like, what's the one thing you worry about?
I
This is
worry
not
that
rapid
I'm
fire.
not, I have so many. What is the one thing? You mean the biggest
The
thing?
biggest thing.
That I'll hurt my children in some way.
No way. You're like amazing. You're number. Okay. What's your guilty pleasure snack?
I don't have guilty pleasure snacks. They're all allowed.
Favorite way to pamper yourself?
Take a bath.
What's your superpower?
I love as hard as I can.
Oh, I love that. What's the most embarrassing thing you've ever Googled?
That's a hard one.
Myself.
Yeah, that's hard.
Have you ever read a Reddit thread on yourself?
No, we do not subject ourselves.
That's what I'm
to.
saying. You do it and then you look at it and you're like, actually, I'm not going to go down that hole today.
No.
FaceTime, text, or call?
Voice message. You know, the little...
I've been very into those lately.
She's been very into them.
Well, for me, it's like the best way to say what you need to say really fast while you're walking the dogs and it's done.
Yeah.
But people hate them.
Biggest pet peeve?
Hard one. Well, probably people who spread misinformation about anxiety on the internet.
Yeah.
Introvert or extrovert?
I used to be an extrovert and I'm a very, very big introvert now.
Oh, interesting.
What's your spirit animal?
The meerkat.
We always ask every guest before they go if you could give advice to your 10-year-old self. What would it be? I can probably
can guess what it is.
can guess what it is.
So interestingly, through social media, something that accidentally happened is I once said it's a beautiful day to do hard things. And it caught on, and now we have it on T-shirts and stickers and mugs. It seems to be something that people with anxiety really hang on to, which is today is a beautiful day to do really hard things.
I love that.
Oh my God, I love that. I need that T-shirt.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. That
You
was
were
so
amazing,
helpful.
Kimberly. It's such a
I got
pleasure.
a therapy session.
We got a therapy session. Everyone, make sure and follow Kimberly on Instagram at Your Anxiety Toolkit. And also make sure and listen to her podcast. It is a wealth of information. It's called Your Anxiety Toolkit. Wherever you stream your podcast, and check out cbtschool.com. It's amazing and a very informative platform. Kim, thank you so much.
Thank you
was
so
much. Because lately we've just been, which is great, talking about anxiety.
Yeah.
How we feel, how we're dealing with it, how we're trying to overcome it, how we're trying not to get caught up in this roller coaster of emotions.
It's a hamster wheel.
It's a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our community, a lot of our listeners, when we ask them, they're like, we need help with anxiety. And because it can just plant its seeds everywhere.
Yeah. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you so much.
And I will be seeing you as a therapist.
Yeah.
You guys, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Can you guys believe it's already February?
No.
Make sure and follow
Valentine's Day.
Emese on her Substack at Molly B. Sims.
Tell Me More is my
Tell Me More.
Substack, and at Emese Gormley for all things Instagram.
We love you guys. Also, our full-length video is on YouTube, so you can watch us in action.
Watch me
here with
sniffle
Kimberly.
through this episode.
She's a little sick. Thanks, Kimberly. We appreciate you. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Lipstick on the Rim with Molly Sims and my ride or die, Emese Gormley. We are so excited to bring you guys along on this journey with us. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Lipstick on the Rim and at Molly B. Sims. Or you can go to my blog where you can dive just a little bit deeper into my favorite products, trends, and more at mollysims.substack.com. And don't forget to check out our video episodes on my YouTube channel, Molly Sims. This podcast is a production with Sony Music. I wanted to give a special thanks to my team, Rosie Cummings, Kenna Ryan, Safine Kevorkian, and everyone at Sony Music. Don't forget to listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss out on the fun.